All right, so you've been following the news out of Ethiopia, right? Specifically, their financial scene.
Yeah.
Big changes happening over there. After almost 50 years, they're opening the doors again to foreign banks.
Wow.
It's a huge policy shift, and the backstory is just as interesting.
Hmm.
To break it all down, we've got our financial expert with us today. So what makes this such a big deal?
It's really a complete reversal. I mean, you got to go back to the 70s when Ethiopia's socialist regime, they nationalized all the banks,
Right.
shut out foreign competition and investment. Now they're doing a full 180. It makes you wonder, is Ethiopia really ready for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's look at where things stand right now. Ethiopia's banking sector, they're currently managing about 3.3 trillion total birrs in assets.
Yeah.
That's for anyone who doesn't know, that's their currency.
Right.
But there's a catch.
Oh, a big one. Access to those services is really limited. Less than half of all Ethiopians actually have any banking services.
Mm,
That means a huge part of the population is cut off from the most basic financial tools.
yeah, it's like, I don't know, trying to run a marathon, but your shoelaces are tied together.
Makes sense. And it's not just about everyday banking either. When it comes to getting loans, Ethiopia is way behind other sub-Saharan African countries.
Yeah.
Only about 500,000 Ethiopians actually have bank loans.
Yeah.
What does that lack of access to credit actually mean for a country's growth?
It's a huge roadblock. If individuals and businesses, if they can't get loans, they can't invest.
Right.
Right. So it stifles innovation and economic growth.
Hmm.
I mean, think about it. How can you start a business, buy a home, even invest in your education if you can't get a loan?
Yeah, that's a great point.
This new law could actually change things.
Yeah. Let's dig into how this law actually works. It outlines 4 ways foreign banks can enter the market.
Okay.
Setting up subsidiaries, opening branches, creating representative offices, or just buying shares in Ethiopian banks.
Right.
It seems pretty comprehensive, but what was the thinking behind this change? Why now?
Well, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, he's been kind of hinting at this for years.
Yeah.
As part of his whole economic reform agenda, he's been pushing for more foreign investment, more competition in all sorts of sectors, and the financial sector. It's a key part of that.
So the big goal, it sounds like, is to attract foreign capital, right? Spark some more competition and hopefully create better financial services for Ethiopians.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing not everyone is happy about this.
You guess right. There's definitely been pushback, especially from members of parliament.
Oh, yeah. What are they saying?
Well, they've got some concerns. Like MP Halima Mohammed, she questioned how this law would work with interest-free banking,
Okay.
which is a big issue. There's a growing demand for Sharia-compliant options.
Makes sense.
Then there's Abeba Deselu. He's concerned about the timing of it all.
Is timing?
Yeah, he's basically asking, is now the right time to be doing this, given Ethiopia's current economic and political situation?
Yeah, I mean, they've had their share of challenges recently.
Exactly. Abeba's point is maybe those issues need to be addressed before they open the doors to foreign banks. And then there's Deslin Chain, right?
Yeah,
Didn't he voice worries that smaller Ethiopian banks are just going to get crushed?
that's right. He's worried they'll struggle to compete against these international giants.
Yeah.
He even said, and I quote, "May God be with you,"
Oh, wow.
which I think says a lot about how uncertain everyone feels about this move.
Yeah, for sure. So how has the NBE, the National Bank of Ethiopia,
Yeah.
how have they responded to all this? What's their take?
Well, the NBE governor, Mamo Miretu, he's been emphasizing that this isn't just about, opening up the sector for the sake of it.
Okay.
He's stressed that stability and careful planning were really important parts of drafting this new law.
Makes sense.
He even mentioned that they spent 3 years consulting and crafting this thing.
Wow, 3 years.
It wasn't some rushed decision.
No kidding.
And actually, a lot of the law, almost half of it, focuses on crisis resolution.
Oh, really?
So it seems they are trying to, mitigate the risks.
That's good to hear. What else did they say?
Well, they're trying to reassure everyone that local banks are strong and the financial sector is stable. But, what does stable really mean in this context?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one of those words that can mean a lot of different things,
Right.
especially when you're talking about something as complex as, an entire financial system.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting, there's another development we need to talk about.
Right.
Another law was passed that gives the MBE a lot more autonomy.
Oh, wow. So more power to the central bank.
Yeah, it's a big shift away from the government dictating lending practices.
Hmm.
It's moving towards a more market-driven approach. The MBE now has more freedom to manage monetary policy,
Okay.
intervene in the financial system, and potentially react more quickly to global economic trends. They can even, merge banks or freeze operations.
Whoa, so they're not messing around. They're giving them some serious tools.
Yeah, and it seems to be part of a larger global trend.
Trent.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more central banks around the world getting this kind of independence.
Interesting. But why? What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the idea is that central banks, they're the experts, right? They're less likely to be influenced by political pressures and more likely to focus on economic data
Makes sense.
and long-term goals.
So it's about, letting the experts steer the ship. But it also makes you think about accountability, right?
Yeah, absolutely. More autonomy has to come with more accountability.
Right. There needs to be some way to make sure they're using their power responsibly and in the best interests of Ethiopia and not just, doing whatever they want.
Exactly. It's like giving someone a powerful tool, but no instructions or safety guidelines. Could be risky.
For sure. So it seems like the NBE has a tricky job ahead of them. They need to balance this new independence with being transparent and accountable, all while navigating these complex economic challenges.
And let's not forget those concerns from the MPs who are questioning if Ethiopia is actually ready for all of this.
Right, those are important voices too.
Yeah. So yeah, the stakes are high, and the NBE has a lot to prove.
Absolutely. But before we get into all of that, let's take a closer look at some of those new powers that were given to them.
Okay. Yeah.
We're not just sitting back and watching this unfold. They've got some pretty significant new tools at their disposal.
That's right. It's not just about letting foreign banks in, it's about having the power to manage what happens next.
Exactly.
We're talking about merging banks, freezing operations, implementing stricter regulations, the whole 9 yards. These are big, impactful tools, and it reflects a global trend.
A trend of giving central banks more independence.
Exactly. But why is this happening? What's the logic behind it?
Well, like we were saying earlier, the idea is that central banks, they're the ones with the specialized knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And their main focus is financial stability.
Hmm.
So the thinking is they're better equipped to handle all the complexities of modern financial markets. They're less likely to be swayed by political pressure and more likely to base their decisions on, actual economic data and long-term goals.
It's about having the right people for the job and trusting them to make tough decisions. But, and there's always a but, this brings up that concern about accountability again.
Right. If they have all this power, how do we make sure they're not abusing it?
Exactly. With more autonomy, you need more accountability. There have to be checks and balances to make sure the MBE is being transparent and that their actions are, open to scrutiny.
Otherwise, it's like, what's stopping them from doing whatever they want?
Right. There needs to be oversight to prevent that kind of situation where one institution has all this power and no one can question them.
So it's a tightrope walk for the NBE. They need to find that balance between independence and accountability and do it all while dealing with a pretty complicated economic situation and those concerns from the people who aren't sure Ethiopia is ready for all of this.
Yeah, they've got a lot on their plate for sure.
Now, before we move on, remember that comment from Desalegn Shane about cryptocurrency and the NBE's ability to regulate it all? Well, the NBE governor dropped a hint that might be relevant here.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
He mentioned how important it is to keep up with global trends and even hinted at potential changes to Ethiopia's crypto laws. Could crypto be the next big thing they tackle?
It's definitely possible. Crypto's everywhere now, and a lot of countries are trying to figure out how to handle it. Ethiopia has been pretty cautious so far, but the governor's comment suggests they're at least thinking about it.
It's like they're dipping their toes in the water, seeing what it feels like before diving in head first.
Yeah, it's hard to say what they'll do.
Yeah.
Will they be open to crypto, create a good environment for businesses and investors, or will they be super careful and focus more on protecting people and making sure things are stable?
And how would that affect their goals for financial inclusion? Ethiopia has a lot of people who aren't part of the traditional banking system. Could crypto help them get access to financial services?
That's a really interesting question. It could be a game changer for financial inclusion, especially in a country like Ethiopia, where traditional banking is so limited.
Interesting. So they're facing a tough decision.
For sure. Crypto comes with risks too. Volatility, security concerns, the possibility of scams. How do you balance those risks with the potential benefits?
Right. It's a tough call, especially for a country that's still figuring out its regulations.
Yeah. They need to be careful and make sure they're not creating more problems than they solve.
So as Ethiopia tries to figure all this out, they have to be cautious and willing to adapt because this is a fast-changing world.
Exactly. And the decisions they make, they'll have consequences, not just for Ethiopia, but for the whole region and maybe even beyond.
Okay, so that's a wrap for part one of our deep dive into Ethiopia's financial shakeup. We've covered a lot, but there's still more to explore. Join us in part two when we'll take a closer look at the potential impact of these changes and what they could mean for Ethiopia's economic future. See you there.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Ethiopia's financial future.
So we've got foreign banks potentially setting up shop, the NBE with all this new independence. What does all this mean for, like, everyday Ethiopians?
That's the million-burr question, right? If things go well, more competition in the banking sector should lead to better products and services.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think lower interest rates on loans, more innovative ways to save money,
Okay.
wider access to financial services, especially in rural areas. For a country where, less than half the population has access to banking, this could be huge.
It's like, I don't know, finally getting high-speed internet in a remote village.
Yeah.
It opens up so many possibilities.
Exactly. And we can't forget about foreign investment. This could make Ethiopia way more attractive for international capital.
So more money coming in.
Yeah, which could lead to job creation, better infrastructure, and just overall economic growth. Think new businesses, better roads, more opportunities for Ethiopians.
Okay, that all sounds good. But I'm sure there are some potential downsides too, right? Some experts are worried about what this will do to local banks, especially the smaller ones. Can they really compete with these global giants?
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. It's like, imagine a tiny local grocery store trying to compete with a massive supermarket chain.
Right.
The resources, the experience, the brand recognition, it's a total David and Goliath situation.
So how do you prevent those smaller banks from getting wiped out? Can you have competition but still protect the institutions that are already there?
That's where the MBE has a big role to play. They need to create a level playing field.
Okay, so no one has an unfair advantage.
Right. Maybe that's through targeted support for smaller banks. Maybe it's regulations that prevent predatory practices. It's about making sure everyone has a real chance to succeed, not just the big players.
So everyone has a fair shot, not just the ones with the fanciest sneakers.
Exactly. But even with a level playing field, there's still the question of regulation. Can the NBE actually supervise all these foreign banks?
Yeah, can they make sure everyone is playing by the rules?
Right, especially with all this new autonomy they're dealing with. It's kind of like giving someone a super powerful tool, but no training.
That's not good.
Yeah. The NBE needs to step up their game, develop the skills and expertise to regulate these foreign banks effectively.
So they need the right people, the right knowledge, the right systems, everything.
Yeah, it's about more than just having power. They need to know how to use it properly. They need to be able to monitor what's going on, enforce the rules, and step in when things go wrong.
So they need to be ready to handle anything, basically. It's a big responsibility.
Exactly. They can't just react after something happens. They have to be proactive and try to anticipate problems before they become disasters.
Okay, so lots for them to think about. It's not just about letting foreign banks in. It's about creating a whole system that protects consumers, makes sure competition is fair, and keeps Ethiopia's financial system stable for the long haul. Speaking of things that need careful consideration, what about that comment on crypto? Remember, the NBE governor hinted at some potential changes to Ethiopia's crypto laws.
Oh, yeah, that was interesting. Especially because Ethiopia has been so careful about crypto in the past. Maybe they're starting to see how important digital currencies are becoming globally, and they're figuring out how they fit into Ethiopia's future.
It's like they were hesitant to try this new thing, but now they're seeing everyone else doing it. They're like, maybe we should try it too.
Right. The question is, how are they going to approach it? Will they go all in on crypto, make it easy for businesses and investors to get involved? Or will they be more cautious, focus on protecting consumers and keeping things stable?
And how will their choices affect their goals for financial inclusion? There are so many people in Ethiopia who don't have access to traditional banking. Could crypto be a way to jump over those hurdles and get them access to financial services?
That's one of the most interesting things about this. Crypto has the potential to be a game changer, especially in countries like Ethiopia, where so many people are excluded from the regular banking system.
Yeah, I can see how that would be appealing.
It's like bypassing all the barriers of physical banks and complicated rules.
So instead of waiting for banks to build branches in far-off places, they could use crypto to bring financial services directly to the people who need them.
Exactly. But of course, there are risks too. Crypto can be really volatile, there are security issues, and there's always the possibility of scams.
Right. How do they deal with all that? Especially in a country that's still developing its rules and regulations.
That's the challenge, right? Finding that balance between the potential benefits of crypto and protecting people and the financial system. They need a smart approach that encourages innovation but also prevents things from going off the
It's
rails.
like walking a tightrope. You got to be careful and stay balanced or you'll fall.
Yeah, exactly. The NBE has to find that sweet spot where they can encourage people to use crypto but also make sure it doesn't destabilize the entire financial system or leave people vulnerable to getting ripped off.
So they need to be thinking about things like preventing money laundering, educating people about crypto, and maybe even working with companies that already have experience in the crypto space.
Right. It's not just about saying yes or no to crypto. It's about having a plan, a strategy that takes into account the unique opportunities and challenges that this technology brings and how it fits into Ethiopia's goals for economic and social development.
So it's about thinking bigger picture, not just focusing on the tech itself. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about what all of this means for you, our listeners. Why should you care about these changes happening all the way over in Ethiopia?
Well, the world is more connected than ever. What happens in one country can affect others even if they're far away.
Right, we're all kind of in this together.
Exactly. Ethiopia's economic reforms, they could have an impact on global trade, on investments, even on how new technologies develop.
It's like that saying, a butterfly flapping its wings in Africa can cause a hurricane in America.
Yeah. The global economy is a complex system, and Ethiopia's decisions could have unpredictable consequences, both good and bad.
So if Ethiopia does well, it could inspire other countries to make similar changes, creating a wave of economic growth and development.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, if things go badly in Ethiopia, it could scare off investors and create instability that spreads beyond their borders.
So it's kind of a big deal no matter where you live.
Right. Whether you're an investor, a policymaker, or just someone who's interested in what's happening in the world, Ethiopia's experiment is worth paying attention to. It's a real-world example of the challenges and opportunities of changing a financial system.
And it's happening right now
Yeah.
in front of our eyes.
Yeah, it's a case study unfolding in real time with lessons we can all learn from. It's about understanding how these big global shifts affect not just markets, but people's lives, their jobs, their futures.
Which brings us to another important point.
Hmm.
How will all of this affect the average person in Ethiopia? What are the real benefits and risks for them?
That's what it all comes down to,
Yeah.
right? We need to look beyond the big economic theories and focus on the human impact. Will these reforms actually help people? Will they lead to greater financial inclusion, more opportunities, a better quality of life? Or will they just make things worse for some people?
Those are the questions we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. We'll dig deeper into the potential social and economic consequences of all these changes and see if Ethiopia is really ready to handle this new financial landscape. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about Ethiopia opening up its financial sector to the world, and now I think it's time to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just happening in isolation, right?
Right. This is part of a much larger global trend.
The trend of what? What are we seeing out there?
Well, we're seeing a lot of countries, especially in emerging markets, they're like rethinking their whole approach to finance. They want to attract foreign investment, boost competition, modernize their economies. Ethiopia is just one example of this.
So Ethiopia is kind of leading the way.
Yeah.
Maybe their actions could inspire other countries, like in their region or even globally, to try similar reforms.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect. If Ethiopia's experiment works out, it could encourage other nations to liberalize their financial systems too. And that could create a much more dynamic and interconnected global financial landscape.
So potentially better financial services and more opportunities for everyone.
Right. When you have more capital flowing across borders, it can lead to a more efficient use of resources. And that could foster innovation and drive economic growth on a global scale. It's like opening up new trade routes, connecting people and ideas in a way that benefits everyone.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's some potential downsides too, right? Not everything is rosy when you have all this interconnectedness. What could go wrong?
One concern is economic dependence. If developing countries become too reliant on foreign capital, they could be really vulnerable if there's a sudden change in the market or a global crisis. That could lead to instability and make it harder to achieve sustainable growth in the long run.
It's like building a house on shaky ground. If something shifts, the whole thing could come crashing down.
Exactly. And there's also the risk of exploitation. If foreign companies come in with a lot of money but don't care about the local communities or the environment, it could end up doing more harm than good.
So it's a balancing act, right? Countries like Ethiopia, they need to find a way to take advantage of these global opportunities, but also protect themselves and their citizens. Make sure everyone benefits.
That's the key. It requires strong regulations, transparent government, and a real commitment to social and environmental responsibility. It's about creating a system that works for everyone, not just the wealthy or powerful.
And that brings us back to the NBE with all that new autonomy they have now. Do they really have what it takes to manage all of this? Can they ensure that these reforms actually benefit the average Ethiopian?
That's what we'll have to wait and see. The next few years are going to be crucial. The NBE needs to show that they can handle this responsibility. They need to balance the need for financial stability with the goal of inclusive growth that reaches every part of society.
So a lot is riding on them. They're in the spotlight. And speaking of things that need careful attention, let's go back to that comment about crypto. You know, the NBE governor hinted at some possible changes to Ethiopia's crypto laws, and that really got us thinking.
Yeah, that was intriguing, especially since Ethiopia has been pretty hesitant about crypto in the past. It seems like they're starting to realize that digital currencies are a big deal globally, and they need to figure out how they fit into Ethiopia's future.
It's like they've been watching everyone else experiment with this new technology, and now they're thinking, okay, maybe we should give it a try too.
Exactly. But the question is, what approach will they take? Will they go all in on crypto, create a really open environment for businesses and investors? Or will they be more cautious and focus on protecting consumers and maintaining stability?
And how will their decisions affect their goals of getting more people access to financial services? Ethiopia has a lot of people who aren't part of the traditional banking system. Could crypto be a way to leapfrog over those barriers and give them access?
That's a big question, and it's hard to say for sure. Crypto has the potential to really change things, especially in a country like Ethiopia.
Yeah, it's a really interesting possibility. Think about it.
Imagine Ethiopian farmers getting microloans through decentralized finance platforms, remittances flowing across borders without those crazy fees, small businesses raising capital through tokenized securities.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing vision.
Right. But it all comes back to that balance. The NBE has to weigh those potential benefits against the risk of volatility, security issues, and fraud.
They need to be careful, but also open to new ideas.
Exactly. And they need to keep talking to everyone involved, from the government and regulators to businesses and everyday people. The future of Ethiopia's financial system is being decided right now, and it's a conversation that everyone should be part of.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Ethiopia's financial world, I think we're left with more questions than answers. Will these reforms make life better for all Ethiopians? Will the NBE handle its new power well? Will Ethiopia become a hub for crypto innovation? We'll have to wait and see.
But one thing's for sure, Ethiopia's journey is a fascinating story. It shows us the challenges and opportunities of changing an economy in a world that's changing faster than ever. It's a story worth following, and we encourage you to keep an eye on Ethiopia. What happens there could affect all of us.
And that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.